Right, my video today is from central Berlin, where I'm going to talk you through the idea of resumptive pronouns. First of all, we're going to look at what they are, and we're going to look at some examples from English, and then we're going to discuss how they are important for linguistic theory. So if we start out with resumptive pronouns, those are little elements that appear within relative clauses. They're little elements that appear when a relative clause isn't totally clear or when we've lost track of what we were going to say. Sometimes they appear when a lot of other things have been going on and the speaker needs another way of being able to relate to what they've been saying before. So let's have a look at a number of examples of resumptive pronouns. Right, a typical relative clause, for example, would have a resumptive pronoun in the following way. We could say, the man who I saw him yesterday. Okay, normally when we build a relative clause in English, we would say, the man who I saw yesterday. We would have a gap in the place of man. The element in the relative clause, the relativized element, the element that is picked up on from before, is not really expressed in the relative clause as such. However, a resumptive pronoun does that. So, the man who I saw him yesterday picks up on the man again. That's the element that has been relativized, so the element that appeared before. So, let's have a look at a number of examples of resumptive pronouns. We can, for example, say, the man who, I saw him yesterday. In this case, we have an intervening discourse marker. We have this element because the speaker isn't quite sure about what they're saying. And in that case, the resumptive pronoun appears later on in the relative clause to sort of recover what we have been talking about before. We can also have an example where the relativized element is much further down the accessibility scale. So, where the element is quite deeply embedded within the relative clause. Let's have a look at the following example. The man who I gave the book to him yesterday. In this case, we have the resumptive pronoun appearing after the preposition to. It appears quite far down in the relative clause, and it actually marks an element that is an oblique within the relative clause. So it's quite far down the line of elements, subject, object, and then in this case, oblique element or secondary object. Right, in English, resumptive pronouns are usually seen as something that is not grammatical, something agrammatical. It's wrong, okay? A lot of people use it in the spoken language though, because when the examples get quite complicated, we sometimes just need a little bit of help in order to be able to trace what we've been talking about. In other languages, however, resumptive pronouns are pretty common. So when we look at Farsi or Romani or even classical Arabic, and a lot of other languages, they make use of these resumptive pronouns in their grammar, and they appear quite regularly in some of those languages, and they are perfectly grammatical. In this final part of the video, let's now have a look at resumptive pronouns and theory. They are actually quite important in some theoretical approaches to language, in particular in the formal realm of linguistics. For example, people have been looking at environments in which resumptive pronouns appear quite commonly. They try to find out what underlies the use of resumptive pronouns and what motivates speakers to use these in certain environments. There are a range of different approaches to this, and people don't always agree as to why this is the case. But typically there are two that are commonly used. One is based in discourse. So you can say maybe resumptive pronouns appear when something is linked to the discourse context, whether or not it is definite within the discourse context, and whether or not we can link it to something that comes before. Another approach to this is to say that resumptive pronouns actually just highlight what is there underlyingly already. Namely, there is some sort of element, there is some sort of gap, there is some sort of trace that is left when a relative clause includes an element of a type. And the resumptive pronoun simply just marks that overtly within the clause. Right, so resumptive pronouns are actually pretty common. They're very common in the spoken language in English. And often they are perceived as wrong or ungrammatical. But actually they can be quite helpful when we have them appear within our relative clauses, and they can help us structure what we're saying a little bit better.